Hi there, welcome to Long Distance Review. And this week I'm looking at the brand new album from legendary 90s rock band, the Smashing Pumpkins. Now, if you're of a certain age, like I am, let's say mid-30s, you'll remember the Smashing Pumpkins from the 90s when they were everywhere. They were the huge mainstream critical acclaim, and you couldn't move for the Smashing Pumpkins. Okay, so those times have gone, but the Smashing Pumpkins are still around in one form or another. So I'll have a little look through the history of the Smashing Pumpkins very briefly, and then I'll come on to their new release, which came out today, entitled Shiny and Oh So Bright, Volume 1, LP, No Past, No Future, No Sun. Catchy title. Anyway, Smashing Pumpkins were formed in 1988, and they're from Chicago. They were always tagged with the grunge, alt-rock, gothic rock, psych rock, space rock. They're a rock band at the end of the day. And like I said, they were huge in the 90s when rock was everywhere. Mainstream rock was massive in the mid-90s, and the Smashing Pumpkins were at the forefront of that. They released their first album back in 1991, entitled Gish. They then released their breakthrough album in 1993, which was entitled Siamese Dream. After that, they released the sprawling, epic 2-hour double album entitled Mellon, Collie and the Infinite Sadness, which is a masterpiece in my eyes. And, you know, this sort of sent them stratospheric. They were huge at this point in time. But like every band, they have infighting and drug problems. Well, every rock band, every 90s rock band. And it wasn't soon after Mellon, Collie and the Infinite Sadness came out that drummer Jimmy Chamberlin left the band, always forcefully left the band, through drug problems. The band carried on and released the strangely sort of electronic gothic synth affair entitled Adore in 1998, with Corgan proclaiming that rock is dead and this is the future of music. I mean, you can go through Corgan's history of proclaiming things. It's probably not one of the stranger ones. The album itself, it probably looked back a bit more fondly that when it was released, it really was sort of scathingly reviewed. And the let's say the popularity of the Pumpkins went downhill a little bit at this point in time. They ended up releasing their final studio albums in the year 2000 after numerous lineup changes. Darcy had left the band by this point in time, and they released Machina Volumes 1 and Volume 2 in the year 2000. I won't do the whole title. And after this, that was it. The Pumpkins were no more. Billy Corgan said that was it. They're finished. The infighting had got too much, etc., etc. And that was the end of the Smashing Pumpkins. They all went their separate ways and released their separate solo projects. And the inevitable happened, as always with these bands. In 2005, they came back together. Well, sort of. A reunion of sorts. Half a reunion, let's say. Because Jimmy Chamberlin and Corgan hooked up again and released an album under the Smashing Pumpkins name. And the album was entitled Zeitgeist, which was a bit of a strange affair, a sprawling sort of rock album, which was a bit of a tough album to get into, to be honest with you. And again, after this, Jimmy Chamberlin went his separate ways from Corgan, although amicably at this time, and Corgan carried on releasing music under the Smashing Pumpkins name, although it really was just him and some hired help. He sort of proclaimed that albums were dead, and he was going to continually release singles under the moniker of the project Tearguiden by Kaleidoscope. So between the years of sort of 2009 and 2014, this was his thing, really. He was releasing singles and songs under Tearguiden by Kaleidoscope. And under this project, they released 2 albums. Albums are dead. Entitled Oceana in 2012 and Monuments to an Elegy in 2014. And actually, Monuments to an Elegy is a decent album, I think. But like an itch that Corgan just can't scratch, and a drink that he can't put down, he came back and reunionised. Is that a word? Anyway, got back together the original lineup of the Smashing Pumpkins. Like every band nowadays, the reunion was inevitable. Now I say the original lineup because, although they attempted to, Darcy Retzky, the original bassist of the band, did not take part in this reunion, and it's almost as like Corgan has erased her from history. If you look at any of his live shows, she doesn't even appear in any of the films they put on the screens and things. It's almost like she doesn't exist anymore. So I won't go into that. That's personal infighting. But hey, that's Billy Corgan for you. Anyway, the band, it's a 3/4 reunion then of James Iha, Jimmy Chamberlin and Billy Corgan. So they got back together, and as I said before, they released the catchily titled Shiny and Oh So Bright, Volume 1, LP, No Past, No Future, No Sun. I won't be saying that much more because I keep getting it wrong. What I will say about this album, It's only 8 songs long and only 31 minutes long. For anyone who knows the Pumpkins' history, as I just went through, this will be their shortest full-length studio album. This isn't the 2-hour sprawling masterpiece that was Mellon Collie. This is a concise, trimmed-down rock album. So what do we get? I mean, the first things we heard off the album was the 2 singles. The first single entitled Solara, which was dropped in the summer, and then Silvery Sometimes, brackets Ghosts, which came out later in the year. What I will say is the Pumpkins played their hands early on this album. I feel like those 2 songs are probably 2 of the best songs on here. Are they an indication of where this album goes? I'm not too sure, to be honest with you. Solara is a great song for me. It's got a huge crunching riff, reminiscent of Zero, and Silvery Sometimes has that big stadium rock chorus that Corgan's inane ability to do, regardless of his more indie sensibilities. This album actually opens up with a song called Knights of Malta, which is a really odd opening song. It's got this gospel choir in the background. It's a more soulful affair. It's got a lot of woe-woes, but it sort of sets a very strange tone for the album, and almost is a bit of an anomaly on the album because it doesn't follow suit. The second song comes in, which is Silvery Sometimes, which really should have been the album opener, and it's a real throwback song to sort of the more 1979 era. I don't mean that in the year, I mean the song 1979. And Corgan's vocals are excellent on this song. Now, Corgan's vocals have always been a bit of a Marmite. You either love them or you hate them. I'm somewhere in the middle, so it's not Marmite really, is it? But personally, I like Corgan's vocals. They can be nasally, they can be whiny, but I've always found, to my ear, a real nostalgic enjoyment in him, let's say. It reminds me of the 90s, and I'm a child of the 90s. And like Billy Corgan, they were a better time, I think. I like it when Corgan gets angsty, and he hasn't done it in a long time. And when you listen to the song Solara, it has his snarling, angsty sneer that he has on like songs like Bullet with Butterfly Wings. And his vocals of Tear Down the Sun, Bring Down the Sun. It's got a real nostalgic enjoyment about it. Now, this album's not all great. There's a ploddy radio rock song that comes in entitled Travels. It's a 5-minute plus sort of forgetful, real radio rock song. It's really ploddy and a bit tiresome, and it overstays its welcome. And for an album that's only 31 minutes long, to have a 5-minute long track that's a bit of a painful experience isn't great. But to have 2 of them kind of cuts the album up a little bit, because the song Alien Nation comes in later on and is exactly the same thing, another 5-minute long plodder. It's a shame, really, because the album without these 2 songs would be a real concise, stripped down, great rock album. But these 2 songs, which equal about 10 minutes in length between them, that's a third of the album gone already with those 2 songs. Excuse me. This album is best, though, when Chamberlin and Iha are let off the leash a little bit, and it harks back to the earlier days of Pumpkins. Maybe it's just my ears, maybe I just prefer that time of the Smashing Pumpkins. But the best song on here and the highlight of the album for me is the track called Marching On. It's a 2.5-minute fuzzed up, gnarly punk rock affair, which really sees Chamberlin let off the leash with thunderous driving drum fills. And it's great. It wouldn't feel out of place on something like Mellon Collie. Personally, I feel that what's happened with the return of Iha and Chamberlin is the more biting edge of the Pumpkins has come back, and that's what I want to hear. And that's what I've missed. That's the sound of the Pumpkins I've missed. That gnarly affair you heard on like Zero and things like that. Barring a few tracks on here, that's what's come back. And it's made this album a real concise affair. A really stripped down, good rock album. Actually, sort of saying about the more ploddy tracks, towards the end of the album, there's a track entitled With Sympathy, which actually is one of the highlights of the album. It's a melancholic, haunting track, which really highlights Corgan's vocals and his ability to sort of carry the melody forward. His vocals have never sounded better than on this album in my eyes. And I know, like I said before, some people just don't like his voice. Personally, I think it's good. And I think he sounds really, really good on this album. And With Sympathy is a great track. It's a real densely layered track. And it's a real highlight on this album. Which brings us to the closing track on the album, which is entitled Seek and You Will Destroy. And it sounds like it could have been taken off a film soundtrack, this song. But it does showcase that this band are well better off with Iha's buzzing riffs and Chamberlin's great drumming. Overall, this is a decent album. I think they've put some really good songs together on here. And for a 31-minute album, I think its majority of this is really, really good. It's not going to better Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, and people who want Siamese Dreams aren't going to get that. You're going to get bits of that, let's say. But for me, if this is Volume 1, I'm looking forward to Volume 2. I'm looking forward to seeing where they'll go from here. Now, unfortunately from Corgan, the mainstream has forgotten about the Smashing Pumpkins, and no matter how much he wants it, I just can't see it coming back. They're not the flavour of the month anymore, and rock isn't the flavour of the month anymore. But I hope that Smashing Pumpkins continue to be a working and functional band, but you never really know with them. Next week, Chamberlain could have left the end, and Iha could have gone, and Corgan will be back to writing his gothic-tinged anthems on his own again. Anyway, let me know what you think. I think it's a decent album. Put in the comments below, like and subscribe, all that kind of jazz. And thanks very much for watching. I'll see you again soon.